Welcome to Fast Politics. Mary Trump.
Mother Jong-Fast.
Hi. Oh, so bad.
What to say? What to say?
I can't believe we've been doing this for so long.
Yeah, I mean, listen, 1,000 years is a long time to do anything. So, yeah.
I feel like we should talk about the military
Mm.
trip because I have a theory that what's happening right now, and I bet you're going to think this is right, but maybe you think it's wrong. So Pete Hegseth brought every general from all over the world back so that he could be like give a big speech like a leader.
Mm. Oh, yeah.
And Donald Trump was like, wait. I'm going to give a speech too. What's going on there?
Well, that's sort of basic Donald psychology 101. He felt threatened because somebody, in his view, was trying to one-up him and get more attention. And who knows if he knew that this thing was happening or if he didn't really think about it much until he realized what a big deal it was. And of course, being Donald, he didn't realize why it was a big deal.
Right.
It wasn't a big deal. It was not a big deal because anything serious was meant to happen here. It wasn't because Hegseth, as Secretary of Defense, War,
Right.
was going to give every single military leader in the United States a brief about something vital. It was a photo op and an attempt for Hegseth to make the world believe that he either knew anything or was a strong leader. But the reason it was a big deal is because it was so unnecessary, so embarrassing, so costly, and so dangerous to our national security.
Right.
But all Donald saw was, oh, it's going to be televised, and why should Pete Hegseth get all the glory? So yes, he had to horn in on Hegseth's
But
territory.
it speaks in my mind to what I think is happening right now in Trump world, and which is it certainly feels like there's a succession fight happening behind the scenes. And you seeing like RFK Jr., JD Vance, Hegseth, all of them sort of jockeying. And that is a way in which this Trump 2.0 feels very different than Trump 1.0.
Hmm, interesting. Well, it's different for so many reasons.
Right.
Partially because I think you're right. There is definitely some kind of succession battle going on. That is it's not exactly under the radar.
Right.
You had JD Vance years because it
Yes,
feels like
exactly.
years.
Years.
A few weeks ago, saying Donald's fine. He's at the
Right.
peak of health.
Right.
But if he died, I'm
Right.
ready. That
Yeah,
wasn't
that
exactly
was
subtle.
imagine if Harris had said that about Biden.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 But at the same time, there's also this race, and this is not new, to out sycophant each other. So one, they're jockeying for position. Two, they're seeing who can kiss his ass most effectively. And I think Kash Patel continues to win that particular battle. But
Yeah.
Hegseth is definitely trying to flex. He can't really flex. If you've seen him try to do a pull-up, you'll understand. But Donald also, and we're seeing this increasingly as well, and this is one of the reasons why the position we're in is most precarious, more precarious than it's been, is whether or not he's aware of the jockeying for a position. I mean, certainly others around him would be, like Stephen Miller, for example. But Donald does feel threatened, whether it's by his underlings or by the bad polling or what have you. He is absolutely doing everything in his power to appear tougher than he is, and I think that was also part of the reason that he showed up yesterday, because on the one hand, much of the speech, and we saw this in the New York Times, was the regular old stuff he talks about every day.
All right.
Obama's terrible. I'm afraid of stairs.
Yeah.
I won in 2020. But then, 2/3 of the way in, we are declaring war on the enemy within.
Right.
And, you top brass of the military must be using American citizens as battlegrounds. Like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
that's dark. So, and that's, I think, the same impetus is behind his ordering military strikes on tiny vessels in the
Right.
Caribbean Sea and obliterating the vessels and the human beings on board them.
In our history of covering this guy as president, whenever there's been a chance to say something really outside the mainstream, he's done it. And I wonder, like when he said, I would like to see you guys train in American cities. It's shocking that he said that, but it's not particularly surprising because whenever and I think like that has worked really well for him because no because sort of nobody he says, and he can I mean, once you've said things that are with such regularity that are so outside the norm, it doesn't it's become sort of without meaning.
Yeah. Well, I think it becomes normalized.
Right.
Yes. So the threat falls away. And I think this is, he's very good at he's good at very few things. But
Right.
he is good at flooding the zone and repeating himself to the point where what he says either becomes meaningless or it becomes non-threatening.
Right.
And the corporate media have done a quite spectacular job of helping normalize him, either by sane washing his insane comments or just reporting on what he says and not putting it in the context of how dangerous much of it is. Because
Right.
essentially, and the other corrupt entity that has helped him is, of course, the corrupt illegitimate supermajority of the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Um, and that's another thing Donald is good at, gaming the legal system to draw things out or to use it as a blunt tool to get his way. So he breaks the law, he commits an unconstitutional act, it goes through the courts, it drags on, he keeps doing the illegal, unconstitutional thing.
Right.
It seems like it's a normal thing now to have American military in American cities, right?
Yeah.
And then the Supreme Court decides has on a shadow docket that says, "We don't know yet if this is legal or constitutional, but he can
Right.
keep doing it until we decide."
Right.
So,
Right.
he has a lot of help.
Yeah. No, no. I mean, they're definitely it does seem like the Supreme Court is pretty scared of him. Or
Yeah.
or they're just sort of on a roll with him and delighted.
I mean, it could be both, the reason I laugh is 'cause and you and I have talked about this a lot, the idea that anybody is afraid of that man is so laughable and embarrassing to me.
But
If you're
so many people
I
are.
Yeah, I know, I have to get over it and accept it, but I have a hard time doing it because it's so unfathomable. So I'm not gonna suggest I would guess that John Roberts probably is, and I would guess that Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas are delighted that
But
they are
yeah.
gleefully taking this as an opportunity to, do what they've wanted to do for decades
Yeah.
and create America in their own image as
Yeah.
a country that is essentially a theocratic apartheid state in which only white, wealthy Christian men, straight, of course, unless
Mm,
you're Peter Thiel,
mhm.
have a say in how
Yeah.
this country is governed.
I wanna go back to this idea that there are people scared of Trump because I think there are a lot. We've seen corporations make payments for things that they didn't owe. We've seen, people do things for regulatory favor that were insane. We've seen we've seen just sort of a gamut of people be clowning themselves for Trump. I think it's because we're soft as a culture and we've never had to stand up for our values. But do you have a different theory of the case?
We have taken so much for granted. I think part of the problem, certainly in 2016, 2020, and even 2024, was that so much remained unimaginable to people. And in
Yeah.
2024, that attitude was, in my view, inexcusable because we saw what happened with Roe v. Wade, We saw what happened with the Chevron doctrine. We saw what this corrupt, illegitimate supermajority of the Supreme Court was more than willing to do. They essentially made Donald Trump an imperial president. So
Mhm.
we were forewarned sufficiently in 2024, but people are lazy and, as you say, soft, and it was just incomprehensible. They liked what they saw. With the corporations and the white shoe law firms and universities and others, I think that some of it is fear, but I think more of it, I mean, I guess it depends on what the fear is. I think for many of them, it's just fear of their bottom line and fear of displeasing their boards, their investors. But it's which is just another way of saying they're craven and the only thing they care about are their profits and
Right.
democracy be damned. Okay, good to know. I think on the individual level, fear is fear in the sense of I am afraid of what this person can do to me is more
Mhm.
operative. And I think that's why we see Republicans to a person behaving as if they exist solely to do Donald Trump's bidding. Now, again, some of them are true believers, and some of them do want a fascist authoritarian regime in which the minority has power in perpetuity.
Right.
But yeah, then there are some who are just afraid of an angry tweet or a primary, or in some cases, their physical safety. Because we know Donald is completely willing to sick his followers on individuals who cross him. Now, I understand it, but it's not acceptable. If that's the problem, then resign and let
Yeah.
somebody who has a backbone serve, because then you're not serving. You are perverting the system to favor one person over the many. And that sounded like a line from Star Trek, actually. Um, but we are heading to the apocalyptic horrors. It does feel like that. So I understand fear is a very powerful motivator,
Yeah.
but I just also don't find it acceptable because it's not like they're the only people who've been on the sharp end of Donald's attacks.
He seems exhausted. You actually know him. Does he seem exhausted to you? Is this wishful thinking? I'm just curious what your take on this is.
Yeah, oh, he seems exhausted. That there's no doubt about that. And in some ways, he definitely seems to be deteriorating. But then again, how do you tell? Because he seems to have been deteriorating for so many years now that I was actually talking to somebody about this the other day. It surprises me that his decline isn't more rapid and comprehensive, that he's still able to pull himself together and be coherent on occasion. But I think there are a couple of things going on, and this was the problem we had with Joe Biden, even though they're almost exactly the same age, and I would say
Right.
that Joe Biden was cognitively more intact than Donald.
I mean, the
Yeah,
irony here is pretty
yes,
rich. Like, we're definitely
yes,
seeing a very similar scenario with very old men and the presidency.
right, but again, I think Donald is certainly now and was then worse
Right.
cognitively and certainly intellectually and psychologically. So the difference, though, is Biden was quiet and
Right.
stumbled with his words sometimes because he had a stutter, and
And also
Donald's
because,
loud and aggressive, and that
right.
translates very differently to people who aren't
Yeah.
paying attention to what he's actually saying. The other thing that we cannot control for or factor in, because we don't know the extent of it, how managed is he? How
Right.
potentially medicated is he?
Right.
Right? We don't
Right.
know any of that.
I think Donald Trump has benefited from doing so much media. So when you have so much media, he's doing pool sprays, he's doing this, he's doing that. This is not a compliment, but it's more of an explainer. He does
Yeah.
so much that even if he makes a mistake, nobody's remembering it because they're 10 press conferences later.
Right.
Whereas Biden was so careful and did so little media that every word he said was totally parsed, and Harris had
Yep.
the same problem.
Yep. Yeah, that's a really good point. And it just goes along with that concept of flooding the zone. And he
Yeah.
does it both in terms of actions, deploying troops into multiple cities and blowing shit up and going after his perceived political enemies and
Right.
destroying agencies and on and on and on. How do you know where to focus your attention? Oh, wait, we need to be focused on everything. Well, good luck with that. And
Right.
he does indeed do the same thing verbally. And I think that also is to his advantage because corporate media can't seem to keep up either because
Right.
then instead of parsing what he says and telling us what he says, they again sane wash it because they want to make it coherent for readers. Well, it's
Right.
not coherent. And that's information.
Yeah.
That's data. And people deserve to know that he isn't actually saying this thing you're pretending he's saying by filling in the blanks, right?
Yeah.
He's saying it this way, and it's gibberish. And he's the
Yeah.
president of the United States, and we should be terrified.
It is true, and I remember anytime I've written about him, like, you'll transcribe some of a speech, and if you really listen to it and transcribe it, it's very different than what you see in quotes, and it's why you can't get as many quotes from him because he won't necessarily say things, and I think it actually really served him was he'll say things like when he came down the escalator back in 2015 and we were all young and slept through the night.
Younger
Back
and so
then,
naive.
right, where we were like, this'll burn itself right out. He said Mexicans are rapists. And that was the last time he like really made a sentence that you could quote like that. Like a lot of the times you'll see him and his sentence will fragment.
Yep.
So it'll end up quoted in a way that won't be completely clear as to what he's saying. And then his people will get it. But for example, the great one was, and there are good people on both sides.
Yep. It's like Mad Libs, you know? You
Yeah.
could fill it in however you want and interpret it how actually, that's a bad analogy.
It's true, like, his people know what he means,
Or they
and
know what
people.
they want him to mean,
Right.
certainly. That is one thing. The question remains why anybody who's objective would take the step of trying to make his incoherence coherent. Like, who does that serve? It only serves him, and it's a false representation of what's going on.
Mary Trump, will you come back?
Of course, Molly jogged fast.